right?
And then I'll show you. And then if you want to share your screen, and we can share the. There we go. Perfect. Perfect.
Where can I?
You
Oh,
can-
okay.
Okay. Okay, folks, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks for being here. Oh my goodness, there is a stomach virus going around. I know because my daughter had it 2 weeks ago. But it's very timely with Dr. Escobar talking about wildlife diseases because it appears we have been hit by something. I don't think it's I think it's a new disease, Dr. Escobar. It's called end of semester-itis that has got us, and it appears to be highly contagious. And if we're not too careful, it becomes repeat the class in the spring-itis because they end up screwing up this time. But thanks again. Today's talk kind of is right up there with Mr. Inglis. When students talk to me about lectures that they really enjoyed, I'm always jealous. It's never mine. It's this one. And it's because Dr. Escobar has a career studying wildlife diseases. He's just not a PhD researcher. He's also a veterinarian. So dual professional degrees. And again, his perspective is really cool. He takes students to Colombia. There's a potential, I'm speaking out of turn here, but in the past, there's been potential for undergraduates to travel to Colombia with him in the summer. That's not South Carolina. And do work on vampire bats. So really, really cool things. And right now, what he's probably going to talk a little bit about, and you might have seen his name in local media, and state media. I think NPR did something. Big focus, a lot of deer hunters in here. What's the big worry? Chronic wasting disease. Well, guess who's leading the efforts here in the state? Dr. Escobar. So you're going to gain a lot from this. This truly is an emerging topic. Whether I deal with salamanders or whether you deal with deer or bison, diseases are a problem. And it takes a lot of money and a lot of effort to tackle those diseases. So please give Dr. Escobar your attention. I guarantee you on the final, which is a week from Saturday, I guarantee you on the final, you're going to have a question or two from today's lecture. Also, thanks to the TAs that have now left the room. I saw them. Oh, there's Ida. All of your ethical, oh, there's Sam. All of your ethical arguments are graded so they can be taken out of your folders. Today would be a great day too towards the end of class. Check your folders, everything that's got grades, make sure you have credit. Let's start cleaning out the folders. Okay. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Escobar. Thank you for giving up your time at the busiest part of the year to come talk to us. Thank you. Yes. 12:15. So let them, and if you want to go to 12:30, they deserve it. Let them.
Hello, everybody. Okay. I love to come to this class, especially for the kind introduction I have from Kevin. I'm Luis Escobar. I wonder if you have seen this TV show. It's inspired in a real pathogen that changes the behavior of the host. So the pathogen is now driving the brain and the decisions of the host. It's a fungus, but we have also examples in other kind of parasites or pathogens like viruses, worms. They also can change the behavior of the host. And that's very interesting because that is strong evidence of coevolution. And I'm going to give you some examples of that in this class. Instead of talking about diseases like they are the evil in the room, like they are doing in this movie, I'm going to talk about diseases or pathogens with lenses of ecology and evolution. Have you seen this movie? Raise your hand if you have seen it. Okay, cool. I'm happy to see that. Maybe in the future, everybody raises it. But this is inspired in a virus too. That I remember this. In this case, they found that the infection of a virus was killing the cells of cancer. So they became working with the virus until the virus was being very effective to kill cancer, but also converted people into zombies. And when this movie was out, there was this virus that circulates in chickens, Newcastle virus, that kills chicken. And they found that people with terminal cancer working with chickens also were able to recover. So they took the virus and they were killing the cancer cells in petri dishes. So actually, these kinds of movies are sometimes inspired in science. But something that I want you to see in this movie is that there was natural selection in which the virus was killing people that didn't have the resistance to the infection. So that's why we have here a person walking alone, because for some reason, the person was immune to the virus. And we saw that recently with COVID, right? Many people were susceptible and were able to develop a very aggressive form of the symptoms, while others were like asymptomatic. And that's because every person is different and the immune system is different. And that's why we have, in the case of COVID, almost 7 million people dead due to the pandemic. That's the amount of people that we see in countries like Bulgaria, Paraguay, Nicaragua, or Libya. So an entire country by a single virus. So this effect of the pressure of pathogens is happening every day. And it's happening in urban areas, in the wild. And being in the wild is a very miserable life. Sometimes they eat, sometimes they don't eat. They suffer the winter. Here we are in a very comfortable temperature. And imagine on top of that having an infection. So pathogens or parasites in ecosystems play a role, a very interesting role. They are pushing the boundaries of the host, so the host can become stronger or can be removed from the population. So I'm going to give you 5 benefits of pathogens. Maybe there are more, maybe I could reduce them and merge some of them, but these are the top 5, which I believe are the main benefits of pathogens in ecosystems. And if we want to understand that, we need to start with thinking in evolution. And this is a classical paper by Theodore Domsansky, who died in 1975, and he was from Ukraine. He came to the States to be a professor, like me. I'm originally from Guatemala. But he was famous, I'm not famous. And they say that Theodore was the most important evolutionary biologist after Darwin. So he was very strong in developing theories in evolutionary biology. And in this paper, he was trying to convince like a final closure, I think, of his career, because at this time there were still many scientists that were creationists, like believing not in natural selection and evolution, but in what the Bible says. So he's providing a series of examples of why we have this overwhelming amount of evidences that natural selection and evolution is how we became humans. So one of the examples is this fungus. This is a very interesting fungus that cannot be found everywhere. Doesn't appear randomly. Actually, you can find it only in France. But if you go to France trying to find this fungus, it's not everywhere. You can find it only in caves, but not in any cave. You can find the fungus only in caves that are of limestone. And okay, you'll find the cave, you are in France, it's a cave of limestone. It's not randomly in the cave. Actually, occurs only in beetles. Okay, you get the beetle and the fungus is not randomly occurring in the beetle. You can find it. Okay, the beetles have some like soft wings and also the hard wings to protect the soft wings. The fungus can be found only under the hard wings in a section of the insect called elytra. So you can see here that this is maybe a very fragile relationship. The fungus has this very specific list of requirements that maybe not every insect can provide. And we see this in almost every pathogen and parasite. When the fungus maybe accidentally falls or is transmitted into another organism, maybe the eye of a human or whatever, it's going to try to survive. And then it's going to cause disease. But that was not the original intention. There are some pathogens or viruses that accidentally fall in a new host, in a new organism. They try to survive. Everybody here is trying to survive. And they accidentally kill the host, like Ebola, COVID, for example. So these are accidents and was not the original intention of the pathogen because they have been investing so much, millions or thousands of years with the host to the point that they have a nice equilibrium. Another example of this is this orchid. Have you seen this before in one of your classes? Yes, could you, no, okay, I can do that, so this is an orchid, it's a plant found in Madagascar, and it's a classic in the courses of biology, should be a class. This is very interesting because you can see here in the bottom, there is like a container, and the container has nectar. There were two scientists, Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace, proposing that if natural selection is actually a hypothesis that is true, there should be an animal that reaches that nectar and is specific to that plant. So there is a very fragile relationship here. And they were looking every morning for the insect and like staring at the orchids and never saw an animal being close to the plant. 40 years later, 4 decades later, some scientists at the time they were there, Darwin and Wallace. Some scientists found a moth that actually was very specific and was very specialized to this plant. And here again, we have this very nice relationship in which there is an excellent match between the pollinator, that is the moth that needs the nectar, and the plant that provides the nectar, but also needs the pollinator. And when I see these very specific relationships, I think on a key and a lock in which there should be a nice match. And if I have this door with this lock and I use a different key, maybe I can damage the lock, right? So that's what is happening with these symbiotic relationships, that when I change one of the actors, maybe I have an outbreak. And that's what we study in my laboratory. So this is how we try to see pathogens in my lab. Like they have a role, they provide a service, and we want to study them without biases. We recently published a paper showing that most of the research on pathogens is biased to pathogens that make people sick, not viruses that just circulate in plants and they do nothing to the plant. We're not studying them. There is not funding. It's hard to get funding to study a virus that is not killing people. So that's why in my research, I also have a bias, because if I need to study 2 pathogens, one is affecting wildlife and humans, and the other is affecting only wildlife. I generally choose the one that is affecting wildlife and humans. Not because it's my favorite, but because it's easier for me to get the money. So I can open positions for students in my lab. And Kevin was talking about that. And we have been taking undergraduate students to Colombia, students that are interested in what I'm explaining here, trying to understand the circulation of pathogens, viruses, parasites, worms, ticks in wildlife. I guess that we're closing now the trips to Colombia because the funding is we're in the more advanced stage of the project. But now we are starting a new one and we need to take students to Chile. So it's not as nice as Colombia, I think. But it's the landscapes are beautiful. You have the driest desert on the world, the Atacama Desert. The last time there was rain there was 5 centuries ago. So it's Chile is a very impressive country. So there are open positions. I'm taking for free 3 students that want to go there in the summer, and a couple more that need to cover their expenses. So just I forgot to include a slide on that. But being in touch with me if you are interested in what I'm explaining here. So basically what I do, yes.
For several weeks too, right? They're there for a good amount of time.
That's an excellent question. We cover the vaccinations because sometimes we work with bats. So we give you the rabies vaccine that can cost between $500 and $800. We pay for the flight tickets. We pay for an insurance to come here. We pay for the accommodation. We pay for the food. We only don't pay for the souvenirs, I think, but it basically is very accessible. And we spent last time a month. Yeah, and it's not vacations. It's super intense. It's super intense. So ask if some of you are interested in applying. I can put you in contact with my students. So can they warn you, and you can think it twice. But it's fun. It's very demanding. It's very demanding, but it's fun.
And one of Dr. Escobar's students that did it for 2 years, you guys just went back a few weeks ago. It was in a paper, right?
Yes. Thank you, Karen. Actually, we are studying climate change, but we cannot wait for climate change to be more dramatic. So what we do is that we study species in warm areas, and then we climb a mountain and we study the same species in cold areas. So we can see the differences there. And based on that, we just published a paper showing that climate change is going to affect pamper bats and rabies, and that we expect due to those effects that bumper bats are going to move to the States between 5 and 20 years from now. So yes, I'm crossing my fingers for bumper bats to come here so I can prove my predictions correct. So when I study the plant, I can study plants and pollinators, or I can study dogs and fleas, which is basically a very similar relationship here. It's very closely relationship that I have this sad example of a white rhino. This is the last male of the species, and it has a person taking care of it, and like the security ward, the body ward, the rhino ward of this specimen. And when it died, it has a tick also, and the veterinarians were taking the tick and putting the tick in elephants, in other species of rhinos, in turtles, and the tick was not attaching to anything. It was very specific to this rhino. So when the male, because it was the last male, there was no option to have descendants, died, the tick also got extinct. And we call that co-extinction. When one species got extinct and there is another one that is fully dependent on that and it also goes extinct, is co-extinction. So that's just an example of how fragile are these relationships, right? But roles of parasites in ecosystems, they remove the weak. We saw that the weak in the sense of non-adaptation, right? Maybe it's somebody like with a lot of muscles and the faster individual in the world, but simply in terms of the immune system weak to the infection. That's something we can relate with in terms of COVID. With COVID, it's not that people their immune system were weak. Actually, with COVID, what we saw is that the immune system was so strong that when the virus was detected, the body was reacting in an exaggerated way to the point that it was harming the body. So people that didn't detect the virus were the people without symptoms. And the people that were having this inflammation, very hard inflammation, like an allergy, the lungs were full of liquids because the body was sending a lot of antibodies and cells and things to fight the virus. Those that were reacting too high were the ones that had the most severe effects of COVID infections. Ticks, for example, or pathogens in general have been with the species for millions of years. This is a sample in amber of a dinosaur that maybe had feathers and a tick found close to the feather in a specimen that they believe was 100 millions old. This is another example of a specimen that has been close to its ticks for a long time. There is a dinosaur here that we still can find on Earth. And it's here. It's a tiny one. I promise you it's there. And it's a tuatara. Tuatara is one of the last dinosaurs and can be found in New Zealand. There are veterinarians taking care of the tuataras, and they found that they had ticks. And at the beginning, they were removing all the ticks manually and leaving the tuataras clean. And they found that the ticks were not attaching to iguanas, other lizards, turtles, and they thought, maybe this is a specific relationship. Maybe we're neglecting the tick, and they found that this was a new species of tick. Amblyoma spenodontic, which is the name of the host, which shows again that it's a tick that is specific to tuataras. And if the tuataras got extinct, the tick is going to go extinct too. So now when they have tuataras with ticks, if there is a high infestation, they remove a few, but still leave some of the ticks there. I study bats, so I have many examples of bats. I don't study tuataras yet. But here, what I can show you is that bumper bats, this is a specimen we found, a male, juvenile male that had injuries from fighting, but was in a very good condition. Body condition. And we found the animal infected with some ectoparasites. So the ectoparasites were not maybe harming that much the host, because we found this specimen in apparently healthy condition. This is another example. The previous one was a bumper bat from Guatemala. This is an insectivorous bat from Mexico, and it has some kind of lice eating the body fluids. And again, something very interesting is that the animal, the host, the bat, was apparently very healthy. And this is another example. This is frugivorous bats. They love mangoes, and this one is from Philippines. And this one, some flies come, they leave the eggs, and from the eggs, there is a larvae. And they open a tiny hole in the skin, they get into the skin, and they eat the fluids of the bat. So all these examples show that the parasites need fluids, so need the animal to be alive, bumping food for the parasites. They don't want to kill the host. What will happen is that if I have a snake with parasites, these circle, white circles here. If the host dies, the parasite also dies. And that's true for all parasites that need the host to be alive. They generally don't want to kill the host. They just want, most of them, there are a few that kill the host at the end of their life stage of the parasite. But they don't want to get the host species extinct. That will be detrimental for the parasite. There is only one example that I can find of a parasite driving the extinction of the host. And this was the case of a snail from, I guess that was one. There was a small snail in an island, and there was an introduction of an invasive snail that was bigger, overcompeting the native snail, and the native snail had a parasite. So they took the entire population of the native snail and sent the population to the London Zoo. It was 12 individuals. And so the snails were already under stress, the trip, maybe the food, the temperature, I don't know. They were not in the native habitat. So the number of parasites, a Microsporidium, this is the photo that I have here, increased because the snails were not strong to fight the infection. And the parasite killed the entire population, which was actually the whole species. And after that, the species was declared extinct by its own parasite. But again, the species was already in trouble, right? It was not the fault of the parasite in their defense. So they removed the quick. Second benefit of pathogens is that they regulate population size. And that's, in the case of rabies, bats can live 40 years. Imagine a mice that is like equivalent size. Mice live 2 years, bats 30, 40 years, easy. And they also are very resistant to diseases, pathogens, infections. They behave during the night, and they live in the flat areas of roofs, so they are in a very safe place. So imagine if there were not control of their populations, we will be inundated of bats. But when they are juveniles, like in this nursery, there are pups of bats here, and there are some mothers taking care of them. With bats, it's very interesting because it's something that doesn't happen in the animal kingdom in general. But with bats, mothers take care of the pups, and they feed them with milk even if they are not their pups. So what happens in these conditions is that sometimes there are a virus called rabies removes between 40 and 80% of the bats, which is a lot. So they help regulate population size, so there are resources for everybody. There is another example of population control through parasites, and this is a mussel in Chile that tastes really good, actually. So what we see in Chile is that here is a male of the mussel that you can find in the ocean, and the yellow tissue are the testicles. And there is a parasite that specializes in eating the testicles. So when animals are infected, they cannot reproduce because the males lose the testicles. And that's good for fisheries because when they are not distracted by love, they focus on eating. And instead of spending energy reproducing, they eat more and they grow more. So fishermen are looking for areas that have the parasite because they have the biggest muscles and they have better prices. And those are not zoonotic, so they don't affect people, so everybody wins, I think. And that's very interesting because if there is pollution, for example, in the water, something that could happen is that the parasite can be exposed to the pollution, could die, but not the mussel. So parasites actually help us to identify if the environment is healthy or not. Besides removing individuals from the population, parasites can also help individuals to persist. And there is a tapeworm, this one here, that when this species of beetle is infected, they live longer which is nice, I think. So instead of living 3 weeks, they can live 5 weeks, which is a lot if you are a virus. Another benefit is this muscle, and this happened last year. There was this, 2 years ago. There are heat waves now more often. So the water becomes very, very hot to the point that muscles die. They boil inside. And they found that there were some muscles infected with a bacteria that makes the shell to be white versus other muscles that are healthy because they don't have the bacteria. But actually what happened with the heat waves is that the bacteria was being like a protection against the sun shine. So muscles with the bacteria were getting less hot compared with those without the bacteria that were like naked and they were dying. So here the infection was good to help the survival. And there is another parasite that when shrimp copepods are infected, they react faster, and that's why I have flash here. They react faster to the presence of predators. And that's because the parasite needs time to complete the cycle inside the shrimp, so needs to keep the shrimp alive. So having the infection actually is a benefit, makes you faster. So pathogens can also be system engineers. Could you think in a system engineer and a species, an animal, for example, that changes the landscape? Any ideas? Example? Yes. A beaver is a good example. The single presence of a beaver population in a place can change the entire ecosystem, right? I have a similar example here with rinderpest virus that is like cousin of this distemper virus that we have in dogs. This rinderpest virus is very interesting, but because only affects ruminants, those animals that eat grass. Could be wild, it could be domestic. Here I have a photo, an image of an outbreak in cattle in Africa. So something interesting is that it's very lethal, it's very fast, it can spread like fire, and that's very interesting because this is a photo of a domestic population, but the same dramatic outbreak happened in wildlife, gazelles, for example. So what happened in this case is that when wildlife died due to the virus, and I didn't find photos of like gazelles dead due to rinderpest. So imagine that. So we have animals dying, all the herbivores in Africa, in Central Africa, and they eat grass, right? So Africa has natural fires. Those are cyclic and help control the biomass. It's part of their ecosystem. So without herbivores eating the grass was very tall that year. And at the moment that there was an ignition of one of the natural fires, the fires were so high and so aggressive that they killed the trees that before didn't die because the fires were like small. So that changed the entire ecosystem because many trees were gone due to a single tiny virus. We have another example with white nose syndrome. Have you heard about white nose syndrome? Who can explain what white nose syndrome is? We need a volunteer.
I've just heard of it.
What do you hear?
That it's a thing.
It's a thing. Yes. Thank you.
Bacteria that is on the bats noses that basically suffocate.
Excellent. The noses, that's white nose. It becomes white. Anyone else? We're building a story. No. Cool. Yeah, it's a pathogen affecting bats. It's good in the sense that it's not affecting people, but it's bad in the sense that it's affecting at least six species of bats. So it's not specific of a single bat. It came from Europe and came to a cave that is very touristic. From them has been spread to the entire country. And what scientists believe that is happening is that here in the States, most of the bats eat insects. So without them, we have more insects in aquatic ecosystems. We expect to have then more insects, like more larvae. So we're going to have more fish. And if we have more fish, we're going to have an entire different ecosystem. So maybe there are not going to be enough resources for everybody in the future. We don't know what's going to happen. Also, without bats, we're going to have more insects of eating or attacking crops. And some of these insects have viruses that they transmit plant to plant. So they expect to see not only more pests, but also more insect-borne viruses affecting plants. So again, a tiny pathogen that in this case is a fungus is changing the entire ecosystem. Another benefit or role of parasites in ecosystems is that they regulate food webs. And this is what I began with. I began my talk with an example like this. Parasites that change the behavior. And this is very interesting to me because shows the fragility of parasites. In this case, there are many species of trematodes, parasites, that need birds or vertebrates as their final host, generally birds. So they go to their tummy and they change the cycle, so they mature and they reproduce, but they need birds. So they leave the host, the descendants, the eggs, leave the host, and at some point they need snails. And then they have a free living stage. They live in the water. And then they need, for another stage, they need snails or crabs. And then they need to go back to the bird to complete the cycle and reproduce. So it doesn't make sense because snails need to escape the birds, and crabs also want to escape the birds because they eat them. They eat them. So what happens is that snails generally are phototropism negative, which means that they look for the dark areas because those are safer. But if they are infected, they are phototropism positive, which means that they look for the light. And that exposes them to the predation. And that's the way, the mechanism the parasite is using to complete the cycle. Saying, okay, don't go to the dark areas. I need to go to the bird and expose the host, the snail. Another example of that is a parasite that, again, needs the bird to produce eggs. Eggs live through the feces. They need to spend one stage in a snail, another stage in tadpoles, and then need to go back to the bird. It doesn't make sense because frogs, they want to be far from birds, right? So how is the parasite facilitating their completion of the cycle? So what happens is that when the parasite enters the tadpoles, they go to the base of the tail of the tadpoles, releases some chemicals, and promotes the production of legs. So instead of converting the tail into 2 legs, it's producing more legs. And those frogs are going to be easier to depredate by the bird. So with that, again, the parasite is changing the morphology of the host in order to complete this cycle. And this is another classic. Who can tell me about this? Yes. Toxoplasmosis, exactly. Who knows what toxoplasmosis is or maybe? Yes?
It's a parasite that, I guess it lives in the mice, causes them to be less afraid of cats. And cats eat them and they.
Excellent, you should be here. next year. Yeah, Toxoplasma is a protozoa, which means it's a very complex organism, more complicated than a virus or a bacteria, but we need a microscope to see it. And they live in mice that to reproduce, they are very picky. They can reproduce only in the intestines of cats. It doesn't make sense because mice wants to be far from cats. Cats are evil, okay? Except my cat. So when they are infected by the protozoa goes to the brain, releases some chemical, or it blocks others to the point that cats are not going to be, mice are not going to feel fear for cats. And that's very interesting because mice, they don't see very well. They smell very well, but they don't see very well. So when they are walking in a room with the whiskers, they are touching the walls. So you're going to, generally, you're going to see a mice working in the corners. When they have the infection, they cross the room. So in the future, if you see a mouse doing that, you can say toxoplasmosis. And if they do a test, you're going to look like an expert. So that's one. The other one is an experiment they did exposing cats to urine of cats, exposing mice to the urine of cats. And mice were not even going to eating. They were starving, but they were not leaving the den. But when they were infected, they were living and they were exposed. They didn't feel the fear to the urine of cats. And we are in the infancy to understand how this works. They found that the entrepreneurs, people that are like brave and they say that I'm going to put my business. I like challenges. People that are entrepreneurs tend to have more prevalence of toxoplasmosis versus people that prefer not to be entrepreneurs. And people that they like dangerous sports, they tend to be it's more likely for them to have antibodies against toxoplasma versus the general public. They also found that people with suicidal tendencies have more antibodies against toxoplasma versus the general public. So we still are understanding how these parasites play a role in our lives. And I remember this example of when people have the flu, before they have symptoms, but they are infected, but before they feel like terrible, they want to go to parties, they want to go to meetings, their behavior changes. Talking about behavior, this is a classic. So I'm sorry if you already know this one, but I want to share. This may be a disturbing video for some. I need to do the disclaimer. I don't want trouble with Kevin. Okay. So insects want to avoid water because they cannot swim. The terrestrial insects. But there is a parasite that again releases chemicals to make the insect feel thirsty, terribly thirsty. And they change the behavior, and now the insect doesn't have fear to the water, and they jump into the water. And then that's necessary for the parasites because they need water to complete their cycle. And sometimes these are small parasites. And remember, I told you that in general, parasites don't want to kill the host. Do you remember that? Because they want to reach the water. Okay, if they arrive to the water, I don't need the host anymore. So sometimes, in general, the host in these situations die after the parasite leaves the body because it's not useful anymore. So not a few parasites, right? These are huge and many. I hope you don't have nightmares. I'm sorry. Yeah, so that's what happens in nature. So by regulating food webs, parasites can change the entire trophic net. For example, when I was a kid, I remember that they told me that jaguars were the top predators in the jungle. Because they eat, I don't know, alligators, crocodiles, anacondas, turtles, everything, they kill everything. But there is somebody more dangerous, not deer, not bats, but a tiny virus that bats can transmit. And these bats, they eat blood and they are biting everything that is sleeping, even people. So they found that bats can transmit this virus to jaguars. They can bite jaguars that are sleeping, and if they infect the jaguars, jaguars can die. And if jaguars die, all the parents are going to be happy. But this is an example of how pathogens are regulating the food webs in nature. They are, and I would like to, I need to write something about that, but they are the top predators. And there are some papers about that, but I think we need to discuss that with more examples. And 6, I told you that I was going to tell you 5. I don't know why I have 6, but parasites are full. Imagine that you are a cat and you eat a mouse that have this amount of parasites in their in intestines. Delicious, a lot of protein. Also, there are other species that are specialists in eating parasites. Here I have a kind of shrimp and a kind of fish that specializes in eating the parasites around bigger fish. So you can see here that the fish is not eating them because it needs them. Here I have a snail that is surrounded by tiny shrimp that are eating the parasites of the snail. So parasites are full. So we can use diseases or pathogens in wildlife management. For example, the rabbit problem in Australia. I don't know if this is going to work. Oh, no, let's try this. Okay, no, it's fine. It's fine, I already saw the video. But to control rabbits, the government of Australia was using a virus affecting rabbits in farms. And this is the amount of rabbits they were expecting to see. This is the real numbers of rabbits, the body mass, I think. So this is the projection without control. So they release the virus and they have a drop in the population, a crash in the population, dramatic mortalities. But you can see here that now the few that were resistant are reproducing and having descendants that are resistant. So they release again another strain of the virus and they decline the populations, and we are somewhere here. The rabbits that remain are again resistant to the new strain. So they have 3 candidates to release and they still don't decide which one. But that's what's happening. But we have a carp problem in the States. And Australia has more experience with it than us. They have a plan to control carp that includes the release of a virus. Carp who is interested in fish here? At least one person, please. Excellent. Who else? Fish. There is a bulk of jobs in the fish field. Fisheries and fish conservation, aquaculture, they are a big source of protein, and we need more fish experts. So fish are very interesting too. Here I have carp. What they do is that they eat the mold, and with that they move the mold, so they change the presentation of light, and with that they change the entire ecosystem. Another example of a systems engineer, ecosystem engineer. They are native of China and they are gone from the wild because they are delicious. So now they only have them in captivity. And there is a legend in China. I have been in China 5 times, and I am very passionate about the culture. And they have a story of three colors of carp: the golden, the red, and the gray. And there was this carp that began to swim against the current of a river. And when it began the race, it was gray, and then became red, and then became golden. And then there was an arc, and the carp jumped to cross the arc, and in the other side, it became a dragon. It's so cool, right? So here we have the dragon carp. In their culture in China, dragons are like more seen like something like wisdom and good luck. And they don't like when in the Western we picture dragons like not smart and dangerous and the negative aspect of dragons, right? So actually they swim against the current, they reproduce in the top of rivers, they again change ecosystems, they are huge. They were introduced here by for consumption. This is the story in the 70s, how they have been spreading across the country. And I have a short video. Okay.
This is what happens when a particular population of fish in the Illinois River is startled.
Oh, run around back. Behind the boat, wow. Watch out, they're everywhere.
These are silver carp, the most notorious of the Asian carp family. Many believe the Illinois River has the densest population of silver carp in the nation.
Ground zero on this invasion.
Asian carp were introduced to the United States in the 1970s to control algae in catfish farms in the South. In the 1980s, floodwaters allowed the carp to escape and infest the Mississippi River basin.
When it comes to the river systems, if it's connected, if it's got a direct connection to the Mississippi or the Illinois River, it's gonna have these fish in it.
Asian carp not only disrupt the food chain, push out native fish, are a nuisance to boaters, but they are also extremely dangerous.
This is about an average size silver carp. This is one that can hurt you when it jumps. Your boat's going 20, 30 miles an hour, this guy hits you, it's just gonna leave a mark.
He was a flying silver carp that broke this woman's jaw as she participated in a sport created for the sole purpose of hunting this nuisance fish. Their population is growing at a rapid pace. The females can lay 2 million eggs a year, and they grow rapidly.
Once they get to a certain size, we don't have a predator that's capable of eating them, and they're just running unchecked.
So how do we get rid of them? Some say if you can't beat them, eat them. They believe that creating an appetite for silver carp will hold their population in check.
The vision about this is to literally educate our people how to eat this fish.
But getting Americans to eat silver carp has been challenging.
People in this country just don't seem to want to pick around the bones. The biggest problem with these fish are that the fillets are filled with bones.
Now there is concern that Asian carp have a path out of the rivers and into the Great Lakes through the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal. So a multi-million-dollar electronic barrier has been constructed to potentially stop the migration.
With the barriers in place, we are effectively plugging the biggest hole for the movement of these fish. It would be very difficult for fish to just swim right through this waterway behind us.
But not everyone is convinced. So cleaning, training, and drying boats every time they come out of the water can prevent the tiny microscopic creatures who move there from ending up in lakes and rivers where they shouldn't call home. It's the best defense we have against the ever-growing world of the silent invaders.
Okay, this side, this is more of the physiology thing, but they jump, right? Why do they jump the car? Wait, yes. Okay. Oxygen, that could be one. In the case, remember they evolved in another part of the world. So we designed our boats in a one way that we didn't know carp. But what happens is that under the water, it's very noisy, the boats are very noisy, and they have very developed ears, more complex than the fish we have here. So it's so painful for them, the sound of the engine, that they jump. And when you open carps that have been exposed to the sound, we can even see their ears bleed. So it's very painful. They are so sensitive that my colleagues in Minnesota, I did a postdoc in Minnesota, they are putting bubbles in the water because that's noisy for carp and they prefer not to be close to the bubbles. But the native fish, they can cross, they don't care. They are also like sound. There are some deterrents that are putting noise in the water, and the native fish, they just swim, but carp prefer not to go there. There is another way to control carp. This lake in Minnesota, they used a chainsaw to open a square in the ice in a lake. They put a net, they throw corn, they wait, and when carp come, they just pull the net. So it's not very efficient, I think. So what can we do to control carp? Related to this class. We can release a virus, right? Viruses are our friends. And this is an herpes virus that was found. We don't have batteries, so I'm going to scream. So this is a virus that was found in private collections of koi fish. Koi fish are very expensive. Are these orange and white fish? We have one, a small population here in one of the gardens, and they are carp. It's just that they are separated. They reproduce with other carp that are white, and now we have a new group of carp that we call koi fish. And this virus was very lethal, and it's a problem in the. Oh, thank you. So it's a wow. So the virus is very aggressive, killing carp. So what we believe is that by using the virus, we can help control carp, because in the wild, we have seen some outbreaks where there are massive mortalities on all ages. Fries, like the baby ones or the adults, everybody dies, which is good, right? If we have this invaders. This is me. Maybe you can find me. This is me. We are collecting samples, kidneys, heart of carp. This was in Chicago, and we were like outbreak hunters. People saying, "Hey, there is a fish kill here." We went there, took samples. We were trying to find what was killing the carp. Because if we find a virus killing the carp, we believe we can use it as a tool to complement what we're doing to control carp. So here, this is the story of carp in Australia. It was introduced to consumption, it escaped, and now it's everywhere. They found a virus, they isolated the virus from an outbreak in Pakistan. They have been studying the virus. They have good candidates, good strains that are super virulent, only to carp, not to other fish, not to birds, not to mammals, not to people. They are ready to release it. And now there is a problem. The public wants the virus to be released, but scientists are not supportive, I think. 50% are in favor, the other half are not in favor. They say that there is not enough evidence that it's going to work. Another scientists say, yeah, but there are no other options. This is a mess. We're losing a species. We should try. They have been trying to infect other fish, native fish, because that's one of the main arguments. The virus can kill other species. They have been exposing the virus, and so far they don't die from the herpes virus in carp. So this might be an option that we may see in the news in the next couple of years. I think I was a anonymous review. We're recording this. Somebody I know was a reviewer of the plan, and it's to this person's very strong plan to release the virus in some populations in Australia. One of the problems is that they don't know what to do with the dead bodies. So imagine, they don't know how fast it's going to kill the fish and what to do with that amount of that fish. So they believe that maybe birds are going to eat some of the dead fish. So they were exposing, this is funny because they were exposing chickens to the virus, assuming that chickens are the same as, I don't know, vultures or hawks or eagles. But they are trying to address any concerns, I think. So that's the what happens with viruses in the wild. But we also need to think in what happens in urban areas like this one. These are two photos I took in Chile when I was living there. I lived almost 4 years in Chile, and what I learned there, because my classmates were studying fish, is that there were areas with a lot of tourism, a lot of perturbance, and fish there were clean, no parasites. So you can see the gills, zero, no parasites. And areas that were without people, without perturbation, without disturbance, have parasites. So it seems that areas that are healthy, ecosystems that are healthy, areas that are wild, are going to have animals with parasites. So parasites are a good indicator of health. In the case of rabies, which I studied, rabies can circulate in bats, bumper bats. That's my specialty. And bumper bats can eat anything: snakes, iguanas, lizards, birds, salamander, amphibians, mammals. And from mammals, opossums can get infected, but rarely, because they can decrease their temperature when they lay the dead. So the virus dies. The virus only loves 37 Celsius degrees. If you increase that or decrease that, they die. The virus dies. So with reptiles, it's too cold. The virus dies. In birds, it's too hot. They have 40 Celsius degrees. So it's too hot, the virus dies. The perfect is mammals, so it's a virus of mammals. And in this picture, the only animal that will die if I infect each of them is going to be the deer. And that's not a problem because it's one deer in the wild. The problem is that we're changing landscapes. So now we have a completely different assemble of species. And now we changed the ratio of amphibians, birds, and mammals, and we have only susceptible mammals here. And that's why we have these outbreaks and emerging diseases. And an example of this is this bear that is living in the forest. It has been there forever, it's happy. Then we arrived, we took the forest, we made a construction, a mole, and somebody comes and says, wow, there is a new bird here, and the bear has been there always, right? So imagine the same, okay, so to study this, we need people studying the environment, studying the animal, and studying the people. It's complicated to understand these complex interactions. And this is something that we know that is happening. But instead of the bear, I want you to think on a virus. And this is the Ebola virus. It's a photo from the CDC, it's a classic. So viruses have been always there. It's us who are changing the landscapes, are introducing species, are removing species. So I want to close the talk with this other movie. So you can see that I like movies. And I don't know if it's going to work, but raise your hand if you have seen this movie, so I don't want to be a spoiler. Okay, I'm going to spoil it. So this is inspiring two viruses. One is Nipah virus. Nipah virus, one of my PhD students is studying Nipah virus. It lives naturally, not causing trouble in bats that eat fruits. Do you remember what fruit I say that they like to eat? Huh? Mangoes. But frugivorous bats, they love mangoes. Juicy, easy to access, abundant and soft. So there was a mango plantation besides a farm, swine farm, pork farm. So bats were eating the mangoes and they infected these pigs. And there was an outbreak on pigs. And those pigs also infected the people taking care of them, the farmers. That was in the late 90s, 98. And then the movie also combines the first SARS pandemic, which was a coronavirus coming from insectivorous bats. So they combine both viruses to tell this story. So I'm going to try to play. Okay, let me see if I can do something here. Yeah. uh, okay, so with that, I would like to finish and thank you for your time.
Hey, real quick, before anybody goes, we gotta do two things, but let's do it before you drive. First thing is give me this one, we're gonna thank Dr. Escobar. The second thing, for your points today, it's super easy. Your name, today's date on the sheet of paper, which is November the 30th. Print and sign your names, that's all you have to do. Let's thank Dr. Escobar.
It's like, I mean, it's all.